Harold Shipman. His name is now synonymous with betrayal, evil, and a cold-blooded manipulation of trust. In the annals of British medical history, few names elicit as much horror and disbelief. A man who wore the mask of a caring family doctor while hiding a sinister secret. He was Britain's most prolific serial killer. With an estimated 250 victims, Harold Shipman's horrifying story shook the very foundations of the healthcare system and left a trail of grief that spanned decades. But how did a trusted doctor transform into a mass murderer? And how did he manage to hide in plain sight for so long? In this chilling true crime documentary, we'll delve into the disturbing case of Harold Shipman, the general practitioner who turned his medical practice into a killing ground. Through survivor accounts, forensic breakthroughs, and a shocking trial, we'll uncover the method behind his madness and the catastrophic failure of oversight that allowed him to continue his murderous spree. This is the story of a man who took the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm and broke it in the most devastating way imaginable. To understand the man behind the mask, we must start from the beginning. Harold Frederick Shipman was born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England. He was the second of 4 children in a working-class family. Shipman's mother, Vera, was a dominant figure in his life. She held high expectations for her son and instilled in him a sense of superiority and ambition. When Vera fell ill with terminal lung cancer, a teenage Shipman watched as morphine eased her pain. This experience would leave a deep imprint on his psyche. Some experts believe that witnessing his mother's death shaped his future actions. He saw firsthand how a doctor could control life and death. This event, rather than traumatizing him, seemed to fascinate him. Shipman excelled academically and went on to study medicine at Leeds School of Medicine. After graduating in 1970, he began working at Pontefract General Infirmary in West Yorkshire. By 1974, he had joined a medical practice in Todmorden. However, his career was almost derailed early on. In 1975, Shipman was caught forging prescriptions for pethidine, a painkiller he had become addicted to. He was fined and sent to a rehabilitation clinic. Remarkably, this serious breach of trust didn't end his career. After completing rehab, he returned to work and managed to rebuild his professional reputation. In 1977, Shipman joined the Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde, Greater Manchester. Over the next 2 decades, he became a well-respected figure in the community. Patients described him as kind, attentive, and always available. Elderly patients, in particular, trusted him deeply. He made house calls, remembered names, and never rushed appointments. He was the quintessential family doctor. But behind this facade lurked a cold and calculating killer. It wasn't until the late 1990s that suspicions began to surface. Several local undertakers noticed an unusually high number of cremation forms signed by Shipman. More alarmingly, many of the deceased were elderly women who had seemed in relatively good health. A fellow doctor, Dr. Linda Reynolds, raised her concerns with the local coroner and the police. An initial investigation was launched, but, shockingly, Shipman was cleared. The police failed to check his criminal record and didn't consult medical experts to analyze the pattern of deaths. Shipman was free to continue his crimes. But his undoing came in 1998 with the death of Kathleen Grundy, a former mayor of Hyde and a prominent community member. Shipman was the last person to see her alive, and he recorded her death as due to old age. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, a solicitor, was immediately suspicious. Kathleen had been active, healthy, and not under any known medical distress. When Angela discovered that her mother's will had been changed to leave almost all her estate to Shipman, she contacted the police. An autopsy revealed that Kathleen had died from a lethal dose of diamorphine, medical-grade heroin. Shipman was arrested in September 1998. A search of his home uncovered a typewriter used to forge the will, along with medical records he had altered to cover his tracks. Investigators began reviewing other deaths linked to Shipman. The scope of his crimes was staggering. After the exhumation of Kathleen Grundy's body and the shocking toxicology results, Manchester police realized this wasn't an isolated case. Investigators began reviewing all death certificates Shipman had issued over the years. The deeper they dug, the more horrified they became. Patterns emerged. Many of the deaths occurred during home visits. Most victims were elderly women. The cause of death was often listed as old age or natural causes, and cremation was frequently chosen, effectively destroying any physical evidence. But there was something else. Shipman often altered medical records after a patient's death to make it appear as though they had been terminally ill. In some cases, he wrote false symptoms or diagnoses that had never been recorded before. This manipulation allowed him to justify issuing death certificates without raising suspicion. By the time investigators completed their review, they had linked Shipman to over 200 suspicious deaths. In 1999, he was charged with 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery. The trial began in October 1999 at Preston Crown Court and lasted until January 2000. The prosecution's case was airtight. They presented evidence of the forged will, the forged medical records, and the pattern of deaths that pointed squarely to Shipman. The most damning evidence came from the toxicology reports. Several bodies were exhumed, and tests revealed lethal doses of diamorphine in their systems. Shipman's defense tried to cast doubt on the forensic evidence and argued that the deaths were natural. But the jury saw through the deception. On January 31, 2000, Harold Shipman was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he never be released. The judge called his crimes unprecedented in the annals of British crime. The public reaction was one of shock, grief, and outrage. How could a trusted doctor, someone sworn to save lives, betray that trust so profoundly? How had the system failed to detect his crimes for so long? A public inquiry was launched, led by Dame Janet Smith. The Shipman Inquiry, as it came to be known, examined over 500 deaths and concluded that Shipman had likely murdered at least 215 patients, with the possibility of up to 250. The majority were women over the age of 65, though his youngest known victim was just 41. The inquiry also exposed serious flaws in the UK's medical and death certification systems. It led to sweeping changes in how doctors are monitored and how deaths are reported. One of the most significant reforms was the introduction of a system where deaths are independently reviewed before being certified. Shipman never admitted to any of the murders. He remained cold and emotionless throughout his trial and incarceration. On January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, Harold Shipman was found hanged in his prison cell at Wakefield Prison. His suicide brought a controversial end to one of the darkest chapters in British criminal history. The legacy of Shipman's crimes continues to resonate. Families of victims were left devastated, not just by the loss of their loved ones, but by the betrayal and the questions that would never be fully answered. His case remains a chilling reminder of the potential for evil to hide behind the most trusted of faces. If you've made it this far and want more deep dives into the darkest corners of true crime, now's the time to support the channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss an episode. We've still got one final part to this haunting story. In the aftermath of the trial and Shipman's suicide, the British public was left with more questions than answers. Why did he do it? What drove a seemingly devoted doctor to become a murderer of such staggering proportions? Psychological analyses have offered a range of theories, but no definitive answers. Some experts believe that Shipman exhibited traits of narcissistic personality disorder. He saw himself as intellectually and morally superior. Others suggest he derived a sense of power and control from deciding who would live and who would die. The morphine he administered mimicked the drug that had eased his mother's pain, suggesting a possible connection to his childhood trauma. But none of these theories fully explain the sheer scale of his crimes. Unlike many serial killers, Shipman didn't seek notoriety. He operated in the shadows, avoiding detection for decades. He didn't mutilate or torture his victims. His method was clean, clinical, and chillingly efficient. He didn't fit the mold of a typical serial killer, and perhaps that's what made him so dangerous. Shipman's case also had a profound impact on the medical profession. Doctors across the UK found themselves under increased scrutiny. The public's trust in general practitioners was shaken. Many elderly patients began to question the intentions of their caregivers. For a profession built on trust, the damage was immense. The families of Shipman's victims struggled with grief, confusion, and anger. For many, there was no closure. Some were never able to exhume their loved ones or confirm the cause of death. They had to live with the possibility that the person they had trusted most had murdered their mother, father, spouse, or grandparent. Even in death, Shipman remained a source of pain and controversy. His suicide deprived many families of a sense of justice. It also sparked debate about prisoner rights, the use of solitary confinement, and the mental health resources available to inmates. To this day, the name Harold Shipman evokes horror. His case is studied in medical schools, criminal justice courses, and ethics classes. He serves as a grim example of what happens when power is left unchecked and trust is abused. His story is not just one of murder. It is a story about the failure of systems, the silence of institutions, and the depths to which a human being can fall. Harold Shipman will never be forgotten, not for his achievements, but for the lives he stole, the hearts he broke, and the legacy of distrust he left behind. Bell Final CTA End of Script. If this story moved you, exposed something new, or kept you thinking, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell notification. Your support helps us bring more untold stories like this to light. Thank you for watching.